Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Board Game Marketing Podcast. Today, we're so lucky to have Malachi on the show, and I'm so excited for everything that he is going to be sharing with us today. So, Malachi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Nalin, and thanks for the invite. Happy to be here.
Perfect. So, firstly, I'd really love it if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and also about the game before we get into the details here.
Sure. I'm Malachi Ray Rempen. I'm originally a filmmaker from the United States, but now I live in Berlin, Germany, and I've been making films as kind of a freelancer, but also teaching filmmaking at a local private college, and recently got into board game design. I've done 2 Kickstarters for 2 different games. The first was called Itchy Feet. It's a travel card game. That was in 2017, the summer of 2017, which I kind of did almost as a lark. Like, it was not really planned. I've done some board gaming, but I was never hugely into it. It was more because I was doing a webcomic, also with the name Itchy Feet. At that time, I'd been doing it for about 6 years. The webcomic's about travel and about language learning, and it was just sort of a way for me to chronicle my, as I was kind of moving around different countries and living different places and learning different languages. And it was, I wanted some way to kind of keep track of that and sort of the funny, awkward things that happen as you traverse those worlds. And it sort of took on a life of its own. I decided one of my friends suggested that I make a card game based on the comic because I was kind of looking for different ways to merchandise. And I sort of said, sure, and dove right into it. And it did quite well on Kickstarter, well enough that I was persuaded by my wife to start another one. And that's when I hit upon the idea of doing a board game about filmmaking, which became Roll Camera, which I just launched on Kickstarter in August of this year, which is 2020 if you're listening in the far future. And that's where we are. Now I'm kind of in this world. Now I'm kind of liking it. I really dig board game design, and I kind of have, over my sort of filmmaking and comic publishing previous experience, developed a skill set that kind of covers a lot of different things that having a board game publishing company requires, from the publishing to the marketing to the illustrating to sort of interfacing with people, all the different parts of it. Not all of it. Obviously, I had to learn a lot about game design, but enough of the skills that I feel like it's something I can reasonably handle and have a couple of times already. So looking forward to what is next, for sure.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for kind of going through your history and the previous campaign you launched, and also kind of how your background in filmmaking kind of inspired this new game that you just launched. I'd really love to understand how you kind of got into the whole game design world, right? Because you were doing something completely different before, and then there it must have been kind of like a shock to come into this world and just figure out the game design, figure out building a community, figuring all this out. How did you kind of get started?
Well, as I said, I'd never really I'm a huge board gamer. I mean, as a kid, I played Magic the Gathering, and my parents always had kind of board games lying around like any family. I did a lot of video gaming with my brothers, and we used to mod and sort of build levels. And I mostly helped him, actually. He does that now as well. He's a video game designer. And it kind of fell off, though. Tabletop things kind of fell off after I became a teenager, and I never really doing much of that until I moved to Berlin. And this was about 6 years ago. And a friend of mine introduced me to Pandemic Legacy, which became basically my first cooperative game, my first legacy game, and my first modern tabletop game. So it was sort of this triple punch of whoa, I had no idea that games could be like this. And that kind of led to then thinking maybe I'll do this card game, which was around the same time also that Exploding Kittens had really become really big. And that was based on this guy who did The Oatmeal, another webcomic. And so I sort of thought, well, I can follow the same pattern. And not that I was expecting to make millions on Kickstarter, which I didn't, but I thought, well, I could apply the same sort of logic. I have a following here with my comic. And so I thought, well, all I had to do was be able to design a game. And I knew I didn't have the skills to do it. So I reached out to my followers from the Itchy Feet, the comic, and I said, hey, does anyone know how to make games? I kind of want to do a card game, but I don't know anything about game design. one of my followers named Maxime Rioux, he's from Quebec, and he put up his hand and said, hey, I'm a mobile app game designer, and I'd always kind of wanted to get into card games, and I love your comic. I'd love to help. So the two of us kind of put our heads together, and over about a year and a half, he kind of brought from his side the discipline and sort of the structure to design and development that I didn't know anything about. And so he was able to really help push things along that way. And then that was pretty much it. I mean, I did a lot of research on my side as well. A lot. I've read Stegmaier blog. At that time, I didn't really go on any of the Facebook groups, for any of that sort of thing. I kind of just figured, because this is the thing, like at the time, I didn't think I was going to be doing board games as a publisher, a self-publisher, and that was going to be the direction I was going to go in. I genuinely thought, well, I'm going to make a little tchotchke basically for my followers, like a card game. How quaint, it'll be something that only will appeal to followers of my comic, and that'll be that. And I'll do this card game, wash my hands of it, and go on to being a filmmaker, as I was always the plan. And it just did so much better than I had anticipated that I thought, well, now I'd better, if I'm going to do another one, I'd better take it more seriously. And so when it came time to do Roll Camera and do the board game, I really did a lot more research. And by research, I mean I knew, for example, that I wanted the game to be dice worker placement. So I went to the game store and just rented all the top dice worker placement games, learned how to play them with my wife, and made notes, copious notes on how they work, what doesn't work, what parts could be relevant to mine, and then other, all the different mechanics as well. I just wanted to learn everything. I kind of started hoovering up all the knowledge and information about board game design that I could. I listened to all the podcasts that were out there that I could find. I read blogs. I just wanted to get really good at it, as good as I could, better than I was with the card game. Yeah, the thing is, what it comes down to is you can do almost anything. And I know that this is what you hear a lot when you're growing up, you can do anything you put your mind to. And that's true. The hard part is putting your mind to it. That's the hard part. And I think you can do that. And I think what filmmaking taught me, my background in filmmaking, is that you just need to practice. You just need the dedication and grit and practice to be able to power through the iterations that are crappy. And as a teacher myself, also this is the message I was trying to get across to my students a lot when it comes to filmmaking, is you don't start out very good. Nobody does. Nobody comes out of the womb a great filmmaker. You have to learn a lot of different skills that all have to come together in this sort of perfect storm to be able to produce something. So it's the same I just applied the same logic to game design. I just thought, well, I just need to learn about it, learn what's good, what isn't, kind of get my finger on the pulse of the community and see what they like, what they don't. Because that's the other thing, right? It's not just what works as a game. It's what are people into. There's trends. There's the community is, there's a big part of the community that's now very into solo gaming. There's a big part of the community that's very against take that mechanics. All this kind of stuff I had to learn and absorb and put into and take and appreciate in order to make a game that was going to be relevant to a modern audience, coming from someone like myself who didn't really have a whole lot of a background in tabletop gaming.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I really love how kind of when you started off doing this, you just reached out into your own audience and started asking questions. And not only that, but you also went into that research phase, right? That market research phase that a lot of people kind of skip over, so that you're able to, like you were saying, understand the little nuances in the actual category itself, understand what people actually like, what the fads are, what the trends are. And I feel like a lot of people skip this part. So I'm so glad you brought this up, because it's just one of those really important things, especially for game designers coming into the industry with a completely different background, just like yourself. So thank you for bringing that piece up.
Well, that's like you say, one of some people skip that was me. I skipped all those things on the first iteration with Itchy Feet. Looking back at it now, I find it hard to play because there's a lot of randomness. The games can take very long. There aren't as many interesting decisions as I think now that I would try and put into it. And obviously, we all look back on our initial work as being very crude, but I think I did not look into I had no idea that there was a gaming community that felt anything about anything. I just did not appreciate that at the time. And it wasn't until after that, and I went to, conventions and tried to talk to publishers, that I kind of realized oh, this game doesn't really fit the gamer's market. It fits the family and party game market very well. But if I wanted to do a board game that was going to appeal to the more, to be a bit more, I don't know, higher quality, it was going to need to be a bit more nuanced in the approach. So yeah, I definitely learned that lesson the hard way. And I don't feel bad if you also have to learn that lesson the hard way. So many lessons we don't appreciate until we go through them ourselves. There's only so much that you can have someone tell you something. You have to sometimes fall down and get back up yourself in order to really understand it. So sometimes it's okay to ignore those lessons or not appreciate them fully later.
Yeah, I really, really like that message that you're saying here, that it's okay to fail and try again, or like not know and continue learning, because a lot of people kind of see an obstacle and they give up, right? They're like, okay, I don't know how to run Facebook ads for my campaign, or I don't even know how to create box art for my campaign. And then they kind of stop there rather than kind of just taking it onto themselves to learn or ask questions or find these groups just like you did, just to go in and just see what other people are doing and just kind of learning from them. So that's a really, really great kind of piece of advice for people too. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So you started off doing this. You were asking your fans, does anyone know anything about game design, things like that, and then you start doing market research. How did you kind of go from that phase where you have that game, that idea, and how did you start kind of building up a crowd for your launch? How did you kind of get people to be excited about the game, about Kickstarter, about it coming soon?
It's so funny, I didn't. I had planned to, so I had started a Facebook group for the game, and I was going to follow all the sort of wisdom, the conventional wisdom of like building up a brand, like building up excitement and everything. And then somewhere, and I can't remember where this was, I read something that was like, no, you shouldn't build up anticipation beforehand. What you should do, because then people can't buy it. They have to wait. They said, what you should do is just launch it and just be like, here it is, I've launched it, let's go. The Kickstarter campaign itself should be something that like builds up interest. And looking back on it, I realized how sort of backwards that thinking is. But at the time, I just was like, oh, okay. So then I deleted all the pages. I didn't do any marketing leading up to it. And I just thought, well, I'll just tell my fans that are followers of the comic, here it is, I've done a game, let's back on a Kickstarter, which is what I did. So, and it worked out okay. The curve, if you look at the curve of backers over the course of the campaign, normally it sort of bumps up at the beginning and flattens and then bumps up at the end again. But mine was a straight diagonal because people were I started with nothing, basically. Nobody knew about it. Initially there was no mailing list, there was no email list, any of that. It was just, here, followers of the comic, I have a game. And then what I did during that month to my comic fans, normally I publish a comic every Sunday, every week. And for the duration of the campaign, I did one every day. I did a 1-panel comic every single day, and every comic said like, here, I'm doing this for Kickstarter month, I'm doing this game. And that was enough to like get the ball rolling initially. And then I think it snowballed and more people sort of picked up on it and found out about it, and it went from there. So they got me over the hump and funded it. I think it was in like 3 days, which now seems like a very long time, but at the time it was very exciting. Yeah, so I didn't, that's the long answer to the question. I didn't really do any pre-marketing. For Roll Camera, it was the opposite. I did as much as I possibly could because I knew that my travel comic fans were not necessarily going to be interested in a movie-making board game. Even though the art is very similar, very few people converted because there's just two different things. So I knew I was basically starting from scratch.
Got it. Okay, so 2 different campaigns with 2 very different trajectories. I'd love to understand more kind of, going into the campaign, these 2 different campaigns, one where it was kind of that diagonal going up to from bottom left to the right-hand side top versus the typical kind of inverse bell curve you see for a crowdfunding campaign. What was it like going through each one of these from like a marketing standpoint? One, you were doing comics each day, right, to get that diagonal. And for the inverse bell curve, most of the work was coming before the campaign. Can you kind of talk me through your process of how you were getting people to continue to be excited and getting people to come to your page and kind of back it?
Yeah, I think for Itchy Feet, I just, the comic character was the same. The name was the same. It was called Itchy Feet, the card game. It was travel themed. Like it was it's lightweight. Like when we designed it, one of the things that Maxime brought to the table when we were starting the design process is that we kind of created the ideal person. I'm sure there's another word for it, a term for it, but basically we sort of created a profile of the type of person we wanted to make this game for. And she had a name, and we gave her like a little background. I mean, it's a fictional person, but basically a sort of amalgamation of all the qualities we were aiming for when it came to the game design, which is a really smart thing. Now that I'm saying it, I realize I didn't do with Roll Camera. But with Itchy Feet, it was really cool because it allowed us to say yes to things and no to things. We knew we were aiming for this type of person, and we weren't going to worry about anyone else. Now, obviously, when you do that and you aim to design and market something to a specific person, other people get on board with it, but it's better to be specific than too broad. There's nothing that appeals to everybody, and anything you try to make appeal to everybody is going to end up appealing to nobody. So that was something that he brought to the table, which was really, really clever and really helped us, gave us direction to go into. And so I knew that my comic had the majority of the fan base were people who fit this profile. And so I didn't think it was necessary to do ads or anything like that. For Roll Camera, I kind of thought, well, maybe some of the people from my comic will convert, because also by the time Roll Camera came around, it was this year's 2020, and 3 years later, my follower size had doubled across social media. So I thought, well, surely there's going to be some percentage of people who read my comic who would also be interested in this movie-making board game. And so what I did is I did a similar thing with Itchy Feet, where during the month of the campaign, my comic became a filmmaking comic. Like it pivoted temporarily from being about travel and language learning to being about filmmaking. And I got so little engagement on those posts. It's like people were really, at best, they were tolerating it. And I did get a few people who were kind of interested, but the Venn diagram of like filmmakers and travelers who follow Itchy Feet is very razor thin indeed. So, and I knew this going in, I didn't fully appreciate how few people I wouldn't have gone through the trouble of making filmmaking comics twice a week during the campaign if I'd known how few people were going to be interested in it. But I basically went the traditional route that you see a lot of Kickstarters going. I built up an email list. Well, first I started on BGG. I engaged people there and on the Facebook groups where I've seen your posts as well. I learned a lot from the stuff that you posted and others. That particular Facebook group is really, really great place to ask questions. Not a really great place necessarily to aim your marketing at. Like you're not trying to find backers there, but a lot of information how to find backers and what the sort of quote unquote like traditional or like conventional path is. So on BGG, I posted my design diaries basically, and I was building up interest. And I think what helped with that, and actually what I would credit with probably the number one thing that helped me in terms of the game's marketing and the outreach and awareness, was the theme was unique. There wasn't really anybody making many games about filmmaking, not in the same approach that I was taking, and I didn't see any games of any of the filmmaking like or movie themed games that I've seen out there. And I don't mean like, the Lord of the Rings game. I mean like games about making films that seemed like they had been made by filmmakers, like people who actually had gone through that process and knew what tensions and what interesting aspects of it to like port over to the board game side. It felt like a lot of these games were being made by people on the outside looking in, which fair enough, But what I brought to the table was my experience in the industry and my experience in the craft of filmmaking and how I wanted to make it a game about shooting, like being on set and like setting up the camera and working with actors and like that sort of thing, which most filmmaking games are about, sort of high-level studio management, which didn't really interest me. And so that aspect of it, just because it was unique enough, and then also the artwork, I'd gotten a lot of comments that was very appealing. Those two things carried it a long way, and I was able to get really great conversions on early Facebook ads I did for the mailing list. I did lead ad forms on Facebook, and I was getting 20-cent leads. And this wasn't like the scoop them up kind. It was, it had a couple steps, so people actually had to confirm their email. And I was getting really, really good conversions. And I think it was just because the theme was unique and the art style was appealing. And it was something people hadn't really seen before or seen enough of. And that was enough. I think that, you can throw all the marketing dollars you want at an unappealing product, and it's just not not going to sell you. It's throwing them uphill, it's throwing them into the wind, basically. I think a lot of good marketing comes from good product design in the end. Those two things are inextricably linked, in my experience.
Yeah, I can really see that when it comes to especially tabletop too, because a lot of people are following that game design, that game development, and then that ends up being that the marketing, just the talking about the process, the design, the actual theme, the mechanics. So I can really see that kind of at play too for your game. You talked about how you were engaging people on Board Game Geek. You were doing all these designer diaries. You were doing these Facebook ads going to your landing page. How did you communicate with your audience before you launched? Like what were you saying to them? What kind of community, where was your community? Was it on a Slack or a Discord, a Facebook group? Can you talk us through some of those communication things you did?
Yeah, I had a work in progress thread on BGG, and I had some I would post artwork every once in a while on the various Facebook and Reddit subreddits and Facebook groups, which, the best kinds to get engagement are the ones that you sort of, the classic ones you see were like, which do you like better, A or B? And then I also had the email list that I was about once a month sending out kind of a reminder email. And I had a Facebook group for the game where people could ask questions and kind of get involved and so on. And my attitude towards communicating with people has always been very open, in the sense that I am seeking people to engage. And by that, I mean, I genuinely want their feedback. When I say that I put up the work in progress set on BGG, and when I reached out and posted these things on Reddit and Facebook, I'm not just doing it to gain followers as a end in itself. I'm doing it so that because I genuinely want to know if this is something people are going to be interested in. So if I post my box art, I'm genuinely looking to see, is this something anyone's going to care about? Because if you post box art and you get crickets back, then that's a bad sign. Maybe you got to rethink your game idea, or certainly the box art at the very least. But if I post a concept out and people are posting going this is really interesting, I haven't seen this before, I'm interested in following it, then I know it's almost early market research and testing. I know whether this is something people are going to be interested in. And so I kind of take that in my communication, I take that to the logical conclusion where I engage people at every level, and I tell them, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? Do you think this is better? That's better. This is going through my mind. I'm not sure if this component is going to work better than that one. What do you think? Sometimes I've already made up my mind. Sometimes I'm doing it and it's just as a way to get people to voice their opinions, and for me to make them feel like I'm listening. But even if I've made up my mind, it doesn't mean I'm not listening. My mind can be changed by people who, by a group of people who feel strongly one way or the other. So it's not that I'm letting them sway my every decision. I'm still making all the decisions, but I'm keeping my ear to the ground, and I'm keeping a very close finger on the pulse of what the people who are interested in this thing want to are interested in, or what they like about it, what they don't like about it, because that, to me, that's the market. And so I'm interested in crafting something that is going to be right for them. Also, obviously, has to be right for me, and it has to be authentic to who I am and what the brand is that I'm trying to put out. But I also need to pay very close attention to what the people on the street, so to speak, have to say. And so I've always taken a very friendly, very open, almost to the degree where a lot of my friends, when they see the posts that I'm making and they see how people are very blunt, because they can be, when backers, for instance, say this component is terrible, this is really ugly, this is horrible, you should change it. My response is always, that's really good feedback, thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, maybe I will consider changing it. What does everyone else think? And, some people who are friends of mine just feel why wouldn't you just say screw you, jerk, leave me alone. It's my game. I do what I want. And it's well, it is and it isn't your game. It is and it isn't your product. It's something you're making. And in a way, it's a shared thing. It's a collaboration. And so you're working with these people, especially in the Kickstarter environment and the backer sort of relationship you have with them, which you need to kind of treat people from the beginning that way. You need to treat the people on your email list. They're going to be your backers, right? Ideally. So you should start treating them like backers very early on, and have those same conversations that you would have during the campaign with them, and build up that kind of, I got a reputation among the backers of being very open and being very communicative and being very genuine and honest, because I was. There's no trick to it. But they were often saying like, defending me to other backers who were being maybe snarkier, saying like, no, he's been very forthcoming. He's being very honest. He's, give him a chance. So that was always my approach in terms of the tone I was trying to set with people.
Got it. Yeah, I really appreciate that you really understand the Kickstarter audience. You really understand that the people kind of behind this like internet kind of computer thing we're always on is that there are these people who are super invested in having you succeed, and they're giving you their opinions because they want to see kind of the best game that it can be made from this idea that you have. So I appreciate that you'll really understand that like Kickstarter backer psyche, and you're using this pre-launch phase as that early market test, right? Kickstarter wasn't your market test. You didn't just press launch.
Right.
For this game, you really asked for feedback, and you took things into account. Obviously you were the decision maker at the end, but you really, like you said, put your ear to the ground. And I think a lot of people forget that part in the communication when it comes to that pre-launch. And I think you really kind of nailed it when you talk about really asking for feedback and just formulating a game too in that way.
And it's a fine line to walk, because I've also seen creators that ask a lot of feedback, but the way it comes off as is they don't know. Like they're directionless, they're rudderless. And so you have to be able to strike both tones. The first being like, I'm open and receptive and interested in all ideas. And the second being like, I have a vision and I'm marching towards it confidently, and everyone can feel confident in me and in us together reaching that goal. And so you have to do a little bit of both. I mean, it's a leadership skill really at the end. You need to be able to listen to trusted advisors and be decisive, and also be willing to admit when you were wrong and take responsibility for that.
Absolutely. So you were doing this communication in the pre-launch phase, right? You were kind of building your audience. You were really testing out what was working, what was not working. And how did you get them to kind of convert into backers on that first day? What kind of things did you do leading up to that first day launch?
I had the notify me on launch, obviously the pre-launch, Kickstarter pre-launch page, which is a big part of it. I had the Facebook group, and I did an event, and I did a streaming upon launch, like right at the launch. I did like a live streaming where I kind of walked through how the game works, and people could come in and ask questions, and I would say hi to them and kind of shout out to them. It was very, I mean, you can see it on Facebook. It's very like cobbled together. It wasn't very super, I'm no YouTuber, so I don't really have a whole setup for that. But I kind of leaned into that. I wanted it to be authentic, because this is the problem when you have something overproduced, then it can feel you're distant. You're too far along the professional path, and you don't need backers' help as much. And I think that can also work against you. Whereas if something feels a bit more raw, and it can't feel unprofessional, but if it is a little bit cruder, it's okay. You can use that to lean into your authenticity a bit more and make you seem more approachable. But that wasn't your original question. Now I've lost it. What was it? Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. That was a really good point, though. The original question was basically, what kind of communication did you do right up to launch day so that people would come back to back you right on launch day?
Basically, just reminding people on the email list. I did basically what it is. I up in the months leading up to the campaign with a newsletter. I did once a month emails where I would post an update, ask questions, ask for involvement, ask us to join in the Facebook group. And then in the week leading up to it, I did one like every 2 days. And then on the day, I think I did 2 within 48 hours or something like that, a little bit before, one right at launch and one after. And you just try to drum up interest, you try and get people excited about it. It's coming, it's here, that sort of thing. You can't, again, the whole thing is you have to be tonally very careful, because you don't want it. It's at the end of the day, it's just a board game. And so you can't, there's only so much that people can get excited about it, and so you don't want to oversell it either. Like it's the most incredible thing to ever happen, because most people, that turns me off anyway. When I see a newsletter, it's like, oh my God, quit your job. Here we come. Kickstarter's here. Everybody pay attention. It's like, well, I do have a life, it is just a board game. But you do there are people who are genuinely really excited. You need to feed into that and make sure that they're feeling it too. Yeah, other than that, I posted on some of the Reddits, the subreddits. I mean, honestly, I think most of the people who helped pledge in those first, because we funded, the Roll Camera funded within 3 hours, and I think what led to that was just the people who had signed up previously up until that point, and they get notified by Kickstarter that we've launched, and then they go for it. So it wasn't I didn't have really a master plan. I think I could have probably been a lot cleverer about it, and maybe gotten even more in those first couple days. But that was certainly the case during the campaign. I feel like I learned a lot of lessons, hard lessons there. Yeah, I basically just tried to get people to go for the notify me, and then on Facebook.
Got it. Yeah. You did mention too that you were like, hey, continuing to remind people, hey, it's coming, it's here, right? That I think is one of the things that a lot of people surprisingly forget to do. Say, hey, it's coming in 3 days, coming 2 days, it's coming tomorrow, it's here. So I'm glad you brought that up too. And you mentioned that you learned a lot of hard lessons during the campaign itself. Would you mind kind of talking us through some of the things that just came to mind when you were thinking through that?
Absolutely. So there were two things that led me to feel pretty, I would say, full of myself is the wrong word, overconfident about my prospects with ads and marketing during the campaign. The first was for Itchy Feet, the card game. I did no marketing, I did zero. If you count me making comics for my followers that were sort of had the picture of the game in it and everything, like targeting them specifically, like that I did do, but I didn't do any Facebook ads. I didn't do any banner ads anywhere. I didn't pay a dime for any of that stuff. And I did just fine. And I think after that, I thought, well, obviously whatever I'm doing is working, and whoever, like, I would see these other campaigns paying for other firms to come in and run their advertising campaigns, and or hiring consultants and so on. And I just was like, ha, so foolish. I'm so great. I can do this all by myself. I've done it before. And then when I was getting these really, as I mentioned, these really cheap conversions, these email lists, building this email list before the campaign launched, I just thought, well, all I'll have to do is point those same ads towards the Kickstarter page instead of the email list, and Bob's your uncle. I'll be rolling in it. And instead, what I found was it dropped like a stone. As soon as the campaign launched, my conversion fell off a cliff. And I don't just mean like the number of people clicking on the ads. That didn't go down. It was basically I ran a sort of complicated arithmetic based on how many people were converting from the email list, and those how much those ads cost to get them on the email list, and then comparing that to how many people were converting from the ads that were sending them straight to the campaign, and which I could track, through Google Analytics. You kind of have to set up a couple of hoops for all the data to jump through, but I managed to do it. And I was running these numbers going, I'm losing money. Like I was gaining, I was making a lot. I was making a profit if you look at it in terms of how much it cost me to get people on the newsletter list initially, and how many of those converted to backers. And then as soon as the campaign was launched, it was like I was doing something completely different. I didn't understand it, and I didn't know what I'd done wrong or what I had done right before. And so I was scrambling, and I was practically begging these companies to take on. Suddenly, I like swerved into the complete 180, and I wanted someone else to take the wheel, because I had no idea what I realized. And the more that I looked into it, and I talked to people who were friends of mine who knew people who were doing Facebook marketing, people at my company, the college where I work that were doing Facebook ads and so on. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized, like, oh man, this whole Facebook ad thing goes deep. There's a reason why there are people who do this job full time for companies, because you can sit there all day long tweaking for better conversions, tweaking, crunching the data, running more numbers, like trying different tests, like, sweetening it more and more to get that perfect like conversion and all this stuff. And I thought I could do it all myself. And I think I probably could if I invested more time into it. But there's a certain point at which, when you're running a company, designing the games, doing all the illustrations, doing the Kickstarter page, doing all the like backer interface, running the pledge manager, all of that stuff, like there's a certain point where you have to let go. Some part of it you have to like hand off to someone else. I think next time I would probably work with somebody who was either a consultant or a company, because for me myself, it felt like too much to learn. It just, and this is coming from somebody who, like I said, like I just swallowed everything I could. When it came to this whole project, I was a black hole of knowledge. I was trying to learn as much as I could and just suck up everything. But this was the red line for me, where I just realized I don't have the bandwidth to do this full time as well as everything else I'm doing full time and get the results I need. I think in the end, I'd be lucky, I think, if I broke even on the ads that I ran during the campaign. I'm pretty sure I lost money.
Got it. Yeah, that's a really important lesson, I would say, that you talked about. You know, even myself too, like when I'm running, like you're saying, like running your own business, there's things that you could definitely really learn and kind of dive into. There's some things that you kind of have to kind of give control of the reins over, just because there are people out there who are experts and who know how to do this in probably a fifth of the time that I myself could figure it out too. And I appreciate you talking about that too, because a lot of people in game design, you know, really want to do both that, the business part, the design part, and the marketing part, and all of that. But, you know, it's a lot to handle. It's a lot for one person. So, you know, I think the takeaway for me here, at least, tell me if I'm wrong, is that it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to reach out to people who can really kind of make this easier, right, for you.
Yeah, I think so. I think what it comes down to really is you got to play to your strengths. Obviously, there's always room to grow, and you want to learn new things. But I think the reason I'm okay doing illustration is because I've got a background. I've been doing a webcomic for 10 years and illustrating before that. The reason I'm okay doing the game design is because the skill set of building an experience for people is very similar to that of filmmaking, in a sense, where you're designing a kind of sort of arc for people that they go through this. So it wasn't a huge leap for me. When it comes to the Kickstarter campaign, like I had made websites for myself. I had promoted myself before. So like I had made some steps in those. But when it comes to internet marketing, like when it comes down to the brass tacks of running ads, I'd never done that before. And so it was a completely new skill. And I think there are people out there who already may have some experience in that. They've done some of it for the company, or maybe that's what they do as a day job. Like, great. In that case, like, go nuts, you know, then you already have a lot of those skills to be able to put towards that thing. I think it's not that everyone needs to necessarily hire a marketing person, but exactly as you said, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to understand where your limits are and say, okay, I don't have the experience. I'm not willing to gain the experience, or I don't have the bandwidth to be able to do that now. Let's ask someone who can. You know, like when I reached out to Maxime about the game design first time around, I knew it was something I had no experience about, and you want someone else to teach you. And you maybe, especially if you can find someone to work with, then you can take those lessons and hopefully grow with that. And the next time you can maybe take the reins yourself, or at least on the bunny hill.
Yeah, I really like how we kind of came back in like a 360 loop here to how you started off too, how you reached out in the beginning and were like, hey, does anyone here know how to create a game? Right? And here when we're talking about advertising too, even in the campaign, like it's kind of that same message too. Also, like you were saying, play to your strengths.
Yeah.
And be okay just kind of asking for help, or to partner with someone, or just to get some third party perspective on it too. So for all this, you know, thank you so much for coming on the show and just sharing all these insights about the campaign and about marketing and kind of what you did with both of these campaigns. I know that people are going to love what you have to say. If people want to learn more about the project or connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at ItchyFeetComic, where I post comics, but I also talk to people. There's the Facebook Roll Camera Game is the Facebook group. There's also rollcameragame.com. And the company, the studio that I'm started up just recently after for Roll Camera and for all the games I hope to do in the future is Keen Bean Studio, which is keenbean.studio. And I'm happy to share. I'm really glad that you invited me on. I'm really happy to share anything that I've learned and hopefully help people along the way. So I genuinely mean this. If you're out there and you're making a game or you want some advice, hit me up. That's what I did when I started out, is asked other people who had come before me. And so I'm happy to pass that on, pay that forward.
I love it. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be reaching out. So thank you so much for your time today, Malachi.
Yeah, thanks, Nalin. This was fun.